Mal, welcome to the Business Growth Mindset Podcast, or the Top Achievers series. It's so exciting to have you here. Mate, apart from the fact that we've been friends for a very long time, and we're both very big fans of each other, you are, and hopefully that didn't come across the wrong way, but we both learnt from each other at moments in our lives, and we've asked each other for our own almost like a mutually beneficial mentoring relationship. One of the things and one of the main reasons I wanted you here is that you, much like me and other top achievers, you've done a lot, right, in a very short period of time. And I think that what I really want the audience to understand is, firstly, and before we dive deeply into this podcast, why don't you share a little bit with our listeners in terms of what you're up to, or where you've been, what you're up to, and kind of what gives you that purpose in life to do what you do.
Cool. Christian, first of all, thanks for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be here. And you're right, we have been friends for a long time, and I've learned a lot from you over the decades we've been friends. Yeah. In terms of where I've come from, I'm a marketer and I'm an entrepreneur, and really, my journey started.
And a DJ.
And a DJ.
Let's not forget that.
Well, that's kind of where it started.
That's right.
The whole thing started with me never wanting to work a day in my life and just wanting to go out and DJ and play music. But it's kind of through that I developed a love for business and marketing in particular. I originally dropped out of uni to become a full-time professional DJ for a number of years. But through that, started a business, started a DJ, an event promotions company. So running nightclubs, but also running festivals as well. But it's through that I started falling in love more with the business side of it than the music side. So while the creative side was always interesting, I was really in love with the business side, which then led me to go back and actually go to uni, finish my degree, and then pursue a career in that area. But it's finding that purpose of once I knew what I wanted to do, I could give it my all, which then led me to the Adelaide Fringe, where I was the digital marketing manager there, Adelaide Uni, head of digital there, before working at a number of agencies, before landing in startup land. So worked at a couple of very early stage startups.
Hang on, before we go into the startups, sure. I think what's all really important, your entrepreneurial journey, because a lot of people that know that you've been an entrepreneur. A lot of people think you've always been corporate. You've actually had a really good balance of both. And I know the startup part's going to be a lot of fun, and there's going to be some big names that you can drop that you were involved in really early on. But you also sold your first digital media business.
Yes.
Right? Yep. In between all these gigs. Yeah. So, do you want to just share that experience? Like, what were some of the learning lessons that you had on that exit?
Yep.
Really, and that was early. What year was that?
That was 2013.
Yeah.
I did that.
Okay.
I guess just to backtrack a little bit from that, my first business I started I was 14 years old. I started that because, again, going back to the DJing, I wanted to own turntables. But Technics SL1200s were like expensive. $1,100, $1,200 a pop. I was 14 years old. I didn't have access to that money. So my mum kindly loaned me that money on the proviso that I pay her back, within a year. So I thought the only way to do that was to actually become a DJ. So I became a professional working DJ, playing at school formals, spring fairs, school discos, all that stuff, different birthday parties to make enough money to be able to do that. But anyway, so that was my first venture. Then my third venture was when where was I? I'd left Adelaide Uni. I was there for 3 years, and I moved on to a startup, so a mobile payment startup, which was kind of Uber Eats before Uber Eats. And that didn't end particularly well, but that then led me to go into consulting. And I started working for myself and picked up a really nice roster of clients, doing a variety of work, and probably was one of the early, real pioneers in like digital consulting, digital marketing consulting.
Absolutely.
And I started doing a lot of work with a number of different agencies. And then one agency in particular, I was doing quite a bit of work for them, and they kind of realized the opportunity to really grow their digital portfolio. So they made me an offer to buy me out. And at the time, it felt like the right thing to do, and it definitely was the right thing to do at the time, because I was finding that with consulting in particular, managing it all, and doing the business development, doing the client relations, as well as doing the work itself, was becoming very overwhelming for me at that stage. I didn't have the right processes and systems in place.
You also had family, you had children, you had a whole bunch of other things going on. Right?
I did, and then I also had another startup I was working on as well. So the opportunity to be able to to cash in, I guess, to cash in on what I'd built with my own consulting, and then to be able to continue working at that agency while I was building my startup as well, was at the time a really good opportunity for me.
Cool. Now, after all that, you went into global startup land.
I did.
Right? So, Uber Eats.
Yeah, and Uber before that.
Yeah, well, that's right. Sorry, yeah, that's right. Of course it was. It was Uber before that. I mean, I was at the launch.
You were.
I was one of the early ambassadors for
Yep.
Uber in South Australia, and it was epic getting all these free Uber Black rides.
Yeah.
We couldn't even get approvals, right? And it was very cool. And so, yeah, you were involved very, very early on with Uber in terms of marketing. And you would say successfully launched Uber in South Australia and I guess helped out everywhere else. And do you want to tell us what that was like, and then maybe the transition to Uber Eats, which was probably bigger because that was very new and we're kind of like a guinea pig of a testing ground, right? Like, for Uber Eats. So do you want to just share that with us?
Yeah, so Uber was a funny story because they actually first reached out to me back in like 2013, I want to say, about working in the Sydney team. But at the time, because of family reasons, I wasn't able to move. So we kind of put that on ice for a little bit. And then when Uber finally was ready to launch in South Australia, they reached back out to me. I told them no the first 2 times because I was for the previous reasons with the consulting, etc. But the third time they came back, it became one of those itches where I had to do it because I kept thinking about the opportunity when you don't want to live with regret. You don't want to live your life and you're like, I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd taken that job. So I did. So working with Uber was a fantastic experience, with 3 of the best years of my life. Particularly working at a startup at that stage where Uber still yet wasn't a household name. We were still, like you said before, we were still trying to get the approvals to even operate, around the world, let alone South Australia. We launched UberX, which was causing all sorts of, disruption in the market.
Our favourite word, disruption.
Yeah, that's right. So that was a really fun experience to learn how to grow and scale a business in that sort of environment. Where you were very much, asking for forgiveness, not begging for permission to do it, but wanting to be able to scale and build that critical mass around a product as well. But it also really taught me very clearly about the importance of knowing, exactly what you stand for and having that real clear mission and purpose as well. Where we were able to look at it and when we are here to change the way transportation works. We want to make transportation, as reliable as running water for people everywhere. And that was something which everyone in the organization understood. So that we went into every single discussion, every single negotiation, every single thing we did was aligned to that vision of this world we wanted to create. Because we felt to the very core of our being that what we were doing was right. And that if you were not with us, you were against us.
Yes.
So having that war footing, not necessarily the most healthy, but it really informed me in terms of like, how do you motivate people? How do you galvanize people around that singular purpose and mission?
And I think for you, it wasn't just how do you galvanise one set of people, it was all stakeholders because it was such a new disruptive process. So it was the angles that you had to play. It was probably a wonderful experience to also be able to launch it with another Adelaide. Well, the CEO was of Australia, or general manager of Australia was David Rawsham, who also is an Adelaide boy, and and he obviously that would probably help that relationship. I remember at the launch, Dave was the first time I'd seen him since school days, and because Dave was also a very good rugby player, and it was quite amazing. It was being part of it, having the opportunity to be part of it as an ambassador, and then obviously we did Uber Eats as an early adopter with the hotels and the bars, and it was really amazing. That transition to Uber Eats, I know you enjoyed that.
I did. It was working at Uber on the ride side of the business. I was only working on the rider acquisition side, so really only focusing on the rider side of the business. Uber being a marketplace, we've got a rider and driver side. While I did some of, particularly in Adelaide, at the early days, I did a bit of everything. Once the team started to build, I focused squarely on rider marketing and rider growth. Uber Eats became my chance to actually own the city and actually build that here from scratch. And again, there was a bit of healthy competition. And you mentioned before about the fact that we were a bit of a test case, and we were. At the time, Uber Eats hadn't launched everywhere yet. It was really only in a few cities in America, a couple in Europe, and Sydney and Melbourne. And that was it. Australia had this opportunity to actually launch 3 cities at once. We were originally going to launch Brisbane and Perth at the same time before I got wind of it and was like, hang on, like I want Adelaide to be part of this. Why not Adelaide? And I remember making my pitch to the regional general manager about why Adelaide needed to be included and why Adelaide could be successful. And I hung my hat on that and went like, we are going in this way. We are a foodie city. You know, we've got the population density for it. You know, you look at the distribution. You know, I'm just pulling out all these charts in terms of like how we would grow, but presented all that data back. And that's another great learning which I had from Uber about the importance of data.
I was about to say that.
Yeah, which I've now taken everywhere.
Yeah. And which has made you a powerhouse because you've always been data driven, but now every time we talk, it's always data, importance of data. And I've always been big on data, but you've brought another dimension to it. So Uber, the whole Uber journey, and then you went on another journey, right? So do you want to talk us through the next steps?
Yeah, so the next steps after that was like after we launched Uber Eats, a variety of things happened in my life, which meant that it was time for me to leave Uber. And it was a bittersweet moment. While I was super proud of everything which I'd achieved there, from launching Uber, launching Uber Eats, and I'm also very proud to say that we grew South Australia to be the second most profitable Uber Eats city in the region. Very proud of that.
Just goes to show that no one here likes to go to a restaurant. Yeah. They like to eat at home, right? It's like someone once upon a time was saying to me, you guys have lots of stoners. That's why you have so many drive-thrus. And I remember when you told me that, I thought, is this like the same stoner approach conversation? And I'll never forget that because I remember, I think that was about 20 years ago. Someone said that to me because back then South Australia was legalised.
We were the weed capital of
decriminalised. That's what it was, and so we were the weed capital. And
everyone,
and so everyone just had the munchies and went through drive-thrus apparently, right? I'm like, hang on a minute, you're not going to do even driving. Yeah. Well, Uber Eats kind of solved that problem.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But anyway, digress.
Yeah, that's right. So I left Uber, and then was looking around for what I wanted to do next. Then I had a couple of stops after that. So first one was at My Budget. So My Budget reached out to me.
You were the national marketing manager at My Budget?
So senior marketing manager there, so heading up the entire marketing growth function. And coming into a very established business with a very established business model, and worked there for a year, and learnt a little bit about how that operated. Sorry, the step before that was
Sky City. I thought you were at the cast. I'm like, hang on a minute. I'm pretty sure you would like putting your hand on the poker machines.
Yes, we weren't allowed to.
No, that's right. Yeah. No, but you were marketing manager there, and they were going through a pretty big transformation themselves.
Yes.
New food and beverage outlets.
Correct.
So I remember we went and had lunch at Madame North.
Yes. Yep.
Look at me and my crazy ass memory. What year was that? That would have been like 20...
That was 2017.
17, yeah. Talk to us.
The casino was great. The casino was, they were
fun there.
They were very much in a transition stage of where they were then and from what they were to what they are now. And I was very much in that transition stage, going in there to try to revolutionise and modernise a lot of the systems which had been put in place. So my remit there was really about how do we build a modern marketing organisation. Prior to me arriving, it was very, very traditional, not very digitally enabled in terms of like the systems, the processes, but also the platforms and tooling which is in place. So my job there was really just to implement a whole lot of systems. To implement a new CRM, implement marketing automation, rebuild the website. So did that, and then it was time for me to move on. But didn't really see my future really being in that space. Again, aligning with that vision and purpose. While the casino was really fun in terms of just like all the activations which happened there. Footy stars coming in, getting to meet Tony Modra. It was a lot of fun.
Tony Modra is your idol. I didn't realise that.
No, he's Modra, right? So anyone who's been at Adelaide for longer than who's been at Adelaide since the 90s.
Oh, I think
he's
one of the last people to kick 100 goals repeatedly year on year. I mean, you don't see that. This is the age of the big forward.
Yeah.
Him, Plugger, and Dunstan, and all those guys that played in the forward line. No, I actually saw a photo of Mods at the mental health. There was a post that came up just today. I was like, he still looks the same, right? So I was like, you're right.
Yep.
So no, that's awesome. So and then from
Then
Sky
My Budget.
City,
Yep,
then it
then
was
went to
My
My
Budget.
Budget. Yep.
Right, so you literally walked across the road.
No,
they'd
yes,
moved.
I did.
Or they
No, we hadn't moved yet.
That's
So
right.
we hadn't moved, so I literally walked across the road to,
You
to
did.
My
You
Budget.
literally walked across the road.
My habits did not change. I parked in the exact same place. So yeah.
Brilliant, man. And then you made a bigger move.
Yes.
And you went to Right-Aware. You know, I mean, growth there's been phenomenal. You know, Dave and the team, you know, have been working at it for a while. Now, for anyone listening, it's another Adelaide, massive Adelaide success story in terms of, you know, back of a garage to a massive organisation. Tell us that you went there as CMO or as marketing manager.
Well, I originally went there to launch the mobile app.
Okay.
So there was a mobile app which Right-Aware were working on at the time called Push. So it was funny because like when I first...
So you guys had a whole bunch of international trainers, bodybuilders, the whole works.
Yep.
It was huge.
Yeah,
right?
we were bringing them in, recording exercise videos with them and putting them all into an app. But when I got there, that was what I was brought on to do. But it was very quickly, I again looking at the data and looking at what was and working with all the different people there, that I started to sense the opportunity for where the business could go. I have been a Right-Aware customer for 10 years now. Pretty much very shortly after.
No, you're a massive unit.
Yeah.
You're waiting for that. Every time Mal and I get together, I always have to do a sizing comparison.
Yeah, that's right.
But so we won't tell that to the lots of people watching. But the truth is, no, you have, and you're really big into training. You've got really one of the things that is really amazing about you is you're very, very disciplined. Right? And all the time I've known you're a master of discipline. It's probably one of the patterns that I'm seeing. Everyone has a discipline. And it's a real clear focus. But we're going to get to more of that. So talk to us more. Right-Aware, you spent a bit of time there.
Yes.
But you also had huge growth as a company too.
We did. So at Right-Aware, I arrived and I quickly realised the size of the market, the size of the opportunity there. And
that was from also being a customer.
From being a customer.
Yeah.
Because I never really thought about apparel. I never really wanted to work in apparel. Like I got e-commerce, I've worked with some apparel brands before back on the agency side, but it was never really something which I saw as a passion. But after going there and speaking with David and getting to know the team and also getting to know the market, I started looking around and scratching the surface and realizing that we could be significantly bigger than what we are. And through various conversations, we created the role David created the role of CMO, put me in that, so as Chief Marketing Officer, to really look after the whole customer function, about the growth, acquisition, conversion and retention of customers, and put me in that role. And through that, I was able to build with the team, implement a lot of systems, processes, but also the right strategy to be able to grow. And through my time there, we more than quadrupled, revenue.
And then you also built a bloody gym in the process.
And we also built a gym.
Right-Aware gym.
We also built a gym, which was very fun.
Like crazy. So I guess the commonalities for those, and I love what you've shared because it's a very clear demonstration that you can do as much as you desire to do, and you've done all that in probably that part that we've spoken about in an 8-year window, right? And I think particularly for our younger audience, I know there's a lot of mum and dads that listen to the podcast, business owners who have their children sitting in because they message me. That is a really, really cool learning. And also some inspiration for you as a young person, because you've got an opportunity to do whatever you want to do in life. And if you become really good at something, you're in demand. And when you're in demand, you can kind of earn that respect by actually delivering results. And I think that's something you've demonstrated. And I'll never forget the conversation that we had, I think it was 2017 early on. And I came to you and I said, Mal, I don't know what I'm going to do next. Right? Do you remember that conversation?
I do remember this, yeah.
And we talked, and I left that conversation enlightened about trusting myself. And what was it? I think you rang me up. You're like, did I just read this right? You're now an adjunct professor at the university, and you're the entrepreneur in resident for Think Lab. And I'm like, yeah, I listened to what you had to say, and I put myself in a position over the course of 3 or 4 months and worked on it. And I think that you have an ability where you know where you want to go, and that's why I reached out. And now it's funny because you come to me and we talk about those things, and that's what I said earlier about this mutual amazing relationship we have. Tell everyone what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I left right away, and everyone asked me, why did you leave? Because it seems really crazy, right? To have quadrupled a business, in 2 years and put this on this amazing path to grow, and will continue to grow. And I'm so proud of what we achieved then. But for me, it goes back down to, I also want to grow, and I'm always looking for opportunities to grow. And if I look back on my career, for the most part, the reason why I've left places, and people always say this to me, like, you job hop, why are you at places for longer? But the reality is that, I get things done when I'm there. I don't think there's a single person who will say that I don't get things done when I'm somewhere. But then when I reach that point and I look for how I can continue to grow, if I don't know how I'm going to grow there, then it's time for me to move on. So I'm always looking for the opportunities to grow.
But where you've gone to now,
Yep.
I don't think you'll be going for a while unless you exit.
Yeah.
So share that with us.
So what I'm doing now is I left right away to move into consulting.
Yep.
Actually,
Back
into consulting, and it was the opportunity now that that I learned so much throughout my career, particularly at Riderware and Uber, about how I could actually start helping other businesses. And the real opportunity now around e-commerce. So really focusing in on e-commerce brands who are really poised for the next stage of growth. Who have been around for a while, doing a few $1 million in revenue, and really helping them scale. Because I'm finding there's a lot of that opportunity with, which is what I did at Riderware. So how can I replicate that success? How can I help other businesses get on that same growth path? So that's something which has been a lot of fun, working with different clients there. But then also
managing your time.
Managing my time, yes, which you've taught me a lot about. I remember within 2 weeks of this, I reached out. We had lunch. I was like, "How do you do this?"
And it was pretty easy, right? Like, see, I think it's easy because that's what I do for people. But the thing is, like, you do your job and you find that easy. Whereas I know other people who struggle, and I think that you're now where you need to be. I look at all these as transitions, as transformational steps for you to go to the next level, not only as an entrepreneur, but as a businessman, right? And so I kind of think it's really cool that you're now accessible to more companies, whereas before your talents and abilities were restricted to the employer. And I think you as an entrepreneur, that's the part that you're craving. And look, I know when I went full hog, when I went 100% advisory, 2.5 years ago, I was like, what am I doing? And then the first 4 or 5 customers came to me, and who, 3 of them are clients still today, and I'm chairman of their boards now, because they went, you're not competing with me anymore. And it was like one of the coolest things. I think we talked about this even a couple of weeks ago, and that's what really blew me away. And now you've got that opportunity. So, but I didn't ask you, what are you trading under?
So just me. So actually,
so it's the Mal Chia brand.
Mal Chia and Associates. That's my advisory brand. But in the meantime, I've also started an agency as well.
Correct.
So I have an e-commerce marketing agency, which is more around the execution side. So I founded that with two friends of mine. So Paul Waddy and Andrew Sabatino, who are well known around the marketing agency, but then also e-commerce space as well. We sort of gap where, how do we provide these e-commerce founders, with really great execution? Because we're already doing the strategy, we're already giving them the advice. Now, how do we give them access to top quality talent to actually
support them through that?
And support them through that, absolutely. Yeah. And that was kind of the gap in the market which we saw, because there were a lot of people who were claiming to do SEO, email marketing, paid ads, etc., but who are experts across a lot of different industries, whereas we just want to focus on e-commerce. Yeah, and so that's kind of been our difference. So we're technically still in stealth mode. So Ecom Nation is the name of the agency. Not in stealth, because I've just announced it here on this podcast.
It's been announced. And when we launch the podcast, it's going to be everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? Cool. No, that's awesome, man. So I think you've answered it, but I want to ask you this question. What do you see is the value then that your business is adding to the world? Because I can ask you that question.
Yeah, you absolutely can. I think the value which we're adding is that we are helping businesses reach their potential. We are helping all these e-commerce brands reach their potential, and that's something where, again, being on the consulting side, I've been very fortunate in the position I am to be able to sort of cherry pick who I work with as well, and
which is important.
Which is super important.
As an advisor, it's really important, because you can't help everyone, and you're not suited to everyone. And I say that to people, and people are like, that's arrogance. I'm like, no, I'm doing you a favour. I might not be the right fit for you. And also, I just don't have the skills that you need. And I think that's really important to also have that confidence to cherry pick and go, hey, it's not just about my skills, I'm doing it for you. And I know you're that kind of guy because you want to help as many people as possible. But if you're trying to, it's like, the analogy, if you're in an airplane and the masks come out, you got to put your own mask on first before you help someone else. Otherwise, you're not helping anybody.
Yeah.
Same thing in consulting. And too many consultants just care about money. And so they just pick up anything and everything. And it's like, come on, man. You're just not delivering anything.
Yeah.
And it drives me crazy because I generally have to go in and clean up a lot of that. Amazing. So, no, okay. So, would you say then, Mal, was there something in your childhood that shaped the type of entrepreneur and business person that you are today?
Yeah, that's
was it the Technic 1200s, or was there something else you think?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I think that experience was definitely part of it and helped shape who I am. But I think even going back towards, and this is more of like a personality trait. There was something where my growing up in a family where my sister is a high achiever. Always has been very successful in everything which she's done. Similar with my mum and my dad as well. I always felt as the youngest that I was overlooked. So I think when I was fairly young, maybe 10, 11.
It's not hard to miss you.
Thank you, but I'm actually the tallest in my family, so I don't know how that happened.
It's funny. At your birthday, I was like, wait a minute. He's not the only person I can pick on. This is hilarious.
But the thing is that it was that fear of being overlooked, which I think. So when I was young, realizing that I don't want to be overlooked.
Yeah.
Particularly being a migrant to the country as well, and not being an Asian kid, so I couldn't really hang out with the Asian kids, and not being a white kid either. I wasn't really accepted. I usually hang out with like the Italians more than anyone else.
I know.
They were most of my friends.
And it's true. You actually have a lot of Italian.
I've got a lot of Italian friends. My wife's Italian.
That's right, Sarah.
But from that, it's like it was that fear of being overlooked that I was like, how do I not be overlooked? So how do I? Which then made me go like, I want to be the best. I want to be really good at everything. So you can't overlook me. So that's kind of driven me throughout my career.
That's really interesting because I think that for some people, it's something that spawns them, or there's some particular adversity they face. In your case, it was kind of like, hey, I'm the baby here, and you're all top achievers around me. I'm just not going to be forgotten. And I wonder how many people have that whole "I'm not going to be forgotten" philosophy. I don't know. I've not heard that before in that context, and I really like it actually. So, what is a top strategy then that you've used for business growth in either working for others or working for yourself?
Yeah, great question. For me personally, with how I've grown, it's really about relationships. Relationships has been critical to everything which I do. And from an early age, just building networks, building relationships, building connections with people, and understanding that it's not about, what's in it for me, but, how can I help? How can I facilitate? How can I support whatever you're doing? Yeah.
When you say that, I have the privilege of knowing you, so I know how much you value relationships and how much time you spent building connections. And it's a common thing that we're hearing from a lot of people, and that I can testify that relationships is one of the most important strategies that you'll ever develop, and it starts now. It doesn't start tomorrow. It's not one of those things that you go, hey, as of tomorrow, I'm going to start giving a shit about the people that I do business with. And, I have one of the things that I really value is my relationships too with people, like quality people. And what people don't realize is the world's a very small place. I remember being in hotel school, and the first thing they drummed into us was network. And I'm thinking, you're teaching me how to be a GM of a hotel. What is with this network shit? And it turned out that I learned very quickly that the global hospitality industry is very small, particularly when you go and study at a Swiss Hotel Association college, because it's a very tight network and there's a standard. And that's when I was very lucky that I got that lesson early, because I was like, oh wow, you screw up here, no one will touch you or look at you. I wish I'd learned that in other areas too. But that's great. Now look, we know that business is not all flowers and rainbows, okay? And we all know that this is one of my favourite topics, failure.
Fail forward.
Correct. What failure experience do you think set you up for success today?
Yeah, so there's one singular moment about failure where I lost a lot of money. So this is back when I was doing event promotions. And
haven't we all had one of those?
We all have had. Everyone's if you're an entrepreneur, like
I've had
not an entrepreneur if you haven't had one of those, right? But probably one was like there was God's Kitchen, which is a global nightclub brand. They were doing an Australian tour, and they were bringing down a few DJs who I loved. And it was a case where I was such a huge fan of them. And we were competing with other cities like Melbourne and Sydney, and the only night which we could get them was like the Thursday. But I ploughed ahead anyway, and I just like with my partners.
Blindlessly.
Yes,
blindlessly.
I just
good.
But I just took a very bull-headed approach to it, and just basically bludgeoned it with my partners that we were going to do this, and this is why. And I convinced them that this was a great idea. Turns out, running a night on a Thursday in Adelaide in the middle of winter, which was all heart but no head, was not a great move. So from that, we did have to lick our wounds. We lost a lot of money. I'm not going to state the sum. My partners, who, if they're listening to this, will know, and they've forgiven me now. We're still great friends, but it was still we lost a lot of money. But I went to it.
I love that they forgave me.
I owned it. So this is my. It was my effort. Because I wanted to do this. I was so passionate about it that I let my passion cloud my judgment.
And that's the learning lesson,
that
right?
Is the learning.
So many entrepreneurs, especially in startup land that we've all been involved in, you get all these people with these wonderful ideas, and they're all fueled by heart. And I have broken many hearts as an entrepreneur, where I've said to people, yeah, it's a great idea, it's all heart. And they look at you and they're like, what are you talking about? I said, there's no substance. It'll fail. And they're like, what do you mean? And they get all angry about it. And it's like, no, think about this. You actually need to think about, are you solving a massive problem? No. I said, so where do you think the money's going to come from? And the concept is the same here. What you've just highlighted is that you were able to identify very early on through a catastrophic failure that all heart, no head. I love that. I wrote that down because I don't think I've ever used that line like that. And but tell me, what were some of the practices that you adopted after that event?
Asking questions, really actually doing your forecast. Doing a proper, well thought out forecast, and really being very critical with it. That's kind of the core of most of what I do now. Just actually looking and going, hey, that's a great idea. Let's actually forecast it. Let's actually think through all the numbers, and let's interrogate the numbers. And also trying to facilitate those discussions where it's not just me trying to push something through, but just trying to bring in other views as well. I think it might be Ray Dalio who talks about triangulating. Where you triangulate different viewpoints. If you're not sure about something, find a few other voices, a few other opinions, and just understand. Like let's triangulate something and figure out, okay, am I right, or how far off am I? Before you decide on a course of action, rather than just going, this is it, or only getting another voice which is going to be like yours, and actively seeking out those contrarians, actively seeking out people who are not going to agree with you, who may not agree with you.
Amazing. That's actually a wonderful learning lesson. I'm really glad you shared that with us. It's also very hard to share failure, particularly when you leave yourself so vulnerable. But I'm glad that they've forgiven you. It's funny, I actually didn't know that story. Out of everything, that's something I think
around that time you were probably going through similar.
Yeah, that kind of time. I think I lost about $30 million.
Yeah, I think around the time we were both going, mine was nowhere near your scope, but I remember just having to cap in hand, go to my folks and just say, I need to.
I couldn't go anywhere, and I managed to pay it all back. But I remember sleeping in my car for. Well, I slept in the I had XO left out of everything that I've managed to sell out. I was just finalising the deal on that, and the bank had forced me to sell my house, and I got really good money for my house. I got a 40% increase in Norwood in what those 2-year 3-year window, and I went from drinking Grey Goose out of the freezer with a fresh juicing machine of peaches fresh peaches in summer, white peaches and vodka, to sleeping in on the banquette essentially at XO. I mean, it was a beautiful place. I mean, fit out, so it was great staring at stars and going crap. And then I'd walk down and go and have a shower at another place, come back. And they were the hardest days of my life. And, I learned a lot of lessons that day too. Mine were more ego-driven, wanting to be bigger and bigger and bigger, and kind of just letting that flow happen. That, if people think flow, for those people that understand flow, I talk about flow a bit, people get lost if that flow's a good thing. But if you start to flow in a direction that isn't in line with your mission and purpose, which you talked about at the beginning, you can get really sidetracked. And for me, it's for you it was heart, for me it was ego that sidetracked me. And I think failure at any catastrophic level does not matter how big it is, it affects us all exactly the same. It's hard. Some people will say to me, what you went through was horrible and how you came back of it was amazing. And it's like, yeah, but I've seen other people who've gone through lesser things. I'm not here to judge them that their experience is any less difficult, because we all have a different amount of resilience that we've acquired over time. And I think that's the other lesson from that. You would have built a lot of grit, but we carry baggage from that. For you, every time you hear God's Kitchen, it probably makes you tremble. Every time I hear global financial markets, I'm like, oh no, please don't. And I hear restaurants, I run, right? So...
but you still keep doing hospitality. It's like...
Not anymore. Lucy has made it very clear to me, right, that there will be no more. However, I am kind of like trying to get the idea of me and a group of others owning a wine bar, or maybe even a mini golf, right?
Yeah.
And there's going to be a liquor license to that. So actually, Mal and I were at Ivan's place for a spit, and this incredible idea came about of us owning a putt-putt mini golf. We actually didn't drink a lot, so it wasn't
It wasn't one of those
alcohol consumptions, but it was quite amazing. Mal, who is your business hero?
Oh, great question.
And why?
I have a couple, and ironically, they both have come up through the same places. So Bill Gates actually was a big hero of mine growing up, for his innovation, for his his attitude towards just becoming the dominant player in that space. But I just love where his head was at, and then what he's developed into as well in terms of becoming this global philanthropist as well. I find a real inspiration. Particularly his view about how things need to be purpose driven, but also that there are all these big problems in the world which we need to fix, and how can innovation support that. So that's been very inspiring to me throughout my journey. But more recently, Satya Nadella, who's the current CEO of Microsoft.
Yeah. That's a really interesting
it is
person to bring up.
Yeah, but absolutely not because of Microsoft, but more because of how he has been as a CEO and what he has done to turn Microsoft from a company which was the most significant technology company in the world, but had kind of fallen back a little bit in the Steve Ballmer years, with like their Microsoft phone, their Windows phone, and this, that, and the other. To then again now making them again one of the top 3 most valuable companies in the world.
What do you think the I have an answer on this, but what do you think the strategic playbook that he used to revert the company back to its glory days?
Simplicity.
Yeah.
Like he just
that's a cool lesson for anyone
everything
listening.
Back,
yeah.
And that's what I love about it. When I've
brilliant.
listened to
I love that.
I've read so much of what he's done, and it was all about let's get rid of all of that. Let's bring this singular focus to what we do and what we're about, and we're about the cloud. So and even like Xbox, which has been this hobby thing, which is sitting there. Xbox is now essential to the cloud, the Microsoft Live and all that. And I'm an Apple user. I'm a massive Apple user. I live in the whole Apple ecosystem.
But yet I have an Xbox.
But that singular vision which he brought to it, has transformed the company, and I love that. I love what they've done.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's that singular focus. It's getting rid of all the distraction, and there's lots of really good examples. Really good examples of that all around the world. And I've been doing a lot of studying lately of really exceptional CEOs who have done that. Jim Collins in Good to Great, they did 5 years of research at Stanford University on exactly this. What separated the good to great leaders? What took them from good to great? focus. No, stop trying to get distracted by the shiny new objects, or trying to go down the rabbit hole of competing with someone else. And it's quite remarkable how the big companies fall into that trap too, not just the little people. So excellent, really good. So Mal, tell me, when you are overwhelmed or unfocused, seeing we've just been talking about singular focus, when you are overwhelmed or unfocused, what do you do to realign?
I think we talked at the start about discipline, and having those habits is important for me because that's how I stay focused and grounded. So I go to the gym every morning. Every morning, 5 a.m. I wake up on a train. So Monday to Friday, and I try to train on weekends too. That is a big thing for me, just to be able to get my mind right for the day. And just to set my body, set my mind, and just be able to bring that focus in. If I do feel overwhelmed throughout the day, I'll take time out. Like I'll go for a walk, I'll take the dog out, I'll play with my son, whatever it is. And then I like to cook as well.
He's a very cute distraction, by the way.
He's great. And I like to cook as well. So all those things, and just being able to just like, I'm going to unplug, and I'm just going to shift my focus, and not be distracted by, what's going on Slack, what's happening on email or this or that and the other. Just, I'm just going to focus on my family. I'm going to focus on me. I'm going to focus on, the dinner which I'm making for my family. Those are the things which, if I feel...
So essentially what you do is you take your mind somewhere else. You distract yourself.
Yeah, and just let everything sort of just like fix itself. And then I come back to it. I learned probably about 10 years or so, that if you feel overwhelmed, the worst thing to do is to try to push through it, because the results are going to be terrible. And also just to know when to just call it quits on the day and just go, do you know what, this problem is it's becoming too much. I need to just take a step back from it, and not think about it and go to bed or whatever that needs to be. I was notorious when I was younger for, working every night till like 1, 2 o'clock.
Startup syndrome.
Startup syndrome, absolutely. And wearing that as a badge of honor. How late did you start last night to work? Oh, you're still on Slack or HipChat at like 11:30 p.m. answering. Oh,
wasn't it ICQ back then?
Well, yeah.
It was, right?
It was.
Yeah, it was ASL 86 location.
Yeah, ASL. Yeah.
I mean, we used to talk in code, and it was like, what? I was like, I'm just not doing this. It was my thing. That was what, 90s?
Yeah, the 90s.
Late 90s.
Yeah. I remember back in like...
Now we're showing our age.
When I first started coding websites, like, I would be up all night because I was addicted to it. I just loved it. So I'd be taking apart these websites, building websites, changing code. Yeah, and I was just addicted to it.
Do you reckon you have an addictive personality?
Absolutely. I 100% do.
Yeah, I think we all do. I think that's one of the patterns we're seeing throughout, and some people are very good at balancing it, but they all have it. Yep. It's kind of the sneaky thing that no one wants to admit, and except Yang totally admits it. But I think that's interesting, and I think it's coming through from what you're saying. But again, it goes back to the point I made earlier, which you've now reiterated. You use disciplines, right, to balance. Like me, I'm a yo-yo, right? When it comes to those things, I'm getting better at it. Children have made me better at that, right? So I've just plateaued up the top of the weight scales. Now we're going to try and come down slowly. What new habit, right? We talked about habits. You talked about the importance of habits, particularly preparation in the morning in the gym for you. And you do love training. What new habit or belief or even behavior for that matter has improved your life so much that you give it as advice to someone?
Sleep.
Really?
Sleep. Go to sleep at the same time every night and just have that, again, discipline and consistency. Don't treat your body like a piñata. You need to look after yourself, and sleep has become one of those key pillars for me. Like, there's the exercise, there's the nutrition, but then there's also the sleep component.
What time do you go to sleep?
I try to be in. I go to the bedroom at 10 o'clock, and I try to be asleep by 11.
Okay, and then what time you're up?
I'm at 5.
Okay, so this is a really valid point. I'm a 6-hour sleeper. You're a 6-hour sleeper, and I would have to agree. My brain, my brain just went back, and I'm thinking, and I'm visualizing my Fitbit, right, telling me my sleep routine. When I go to sleep at the same time every night, and I know my body clock tells me it's now time to sleep, and I get up, because I'm like you, I'm a 4:35 a.m. riser, that makes a massive difference. Now, as soon as you said that, it just hit me, and I'm like, crap, I've been going all over the shop in my sleep, but my energy doesn't change, right? So during that, but my brain fatigues faster.
Yes.
So really valid point. Really good advice, Mal. Very good advice.
There's a great book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker.
Okay.
Funnily enough, it was recommended. It was one of Bill Gates's 10 books to read a couple of years back. Where he talks about,
you are a reader, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. I love reading. So that's another habit as well. I try to read about 20 pages minimum, a day, and I read. I don't do audiobooks. I read on my Kindle. So I used to try to do a book a week, but now it's like a book a month. Now, if you can do a book a month, I'm pretty happy.
Yeah.
But the whole thing
with 3 children, I could see how that could become a book. Talking about books, and thank you for Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. Which book or books have actually greatly influenced your life? Because you are like a prolific reader. You're on like Toby Pierce's like ability on reading. He reads so much. That's who's inspired me to read, because I'm just like, you can't be this young and know all this stuff. So I'm going to learn to read, and I steal all of his reading material. Whatever he puts up, I'm reading that book. What you two? You're a big reader, right? And you're a sponge. So, which book or books?
Books. Currently, one which I read recently, which has been very transformative, is called not Tribes. It's one about the All Blacks. Why can't I remember this? It's
about the rugby team.
Yeah, about the rugby team.
Okay.
Can you give me 2 seconds? I'm going to look this up.
Check it up. I don't think anyone on the podcast has ever pulled out their phone to Google a reference. I love it. We should do this more often with people. Right? So
Legacy.
Legacy.
Yeah, I was thinking Tribes. That's right. I'm reading Tribes.
What blew you away? Why is that a book that you would recommend to someone?
Because they talked about the All Blacks being one of the most successful professional sports teams
who hadn't won a World Cup for a long time, and then just have gone ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum.
Yep.
They hit a tipping point, right?
And
is that in the book?
This is about the book.
Oh, then I got
because they were like, why we were never able to do that? Why were we losing? And part of that was about the culture which they were trying to build. So they went back to square one and actually went back to their roots about what it means to be an All Black.
Is this did they talk about how rugby union used to be only private schoolboys sport, and then they made it, and they put it to get a bigger pool of players. They made people. Is that in the book?
They don't talk about
because that was one of the big things that the New Zealand Rugby Federation did as a rugby player. It was transformative, but maybe this was well before that time, because they realised very early on, rugby union is the game played in heaven, right? So it's one of those sports that has only ever been played in private schools. In Australia, I'm pretty sure it's still only played in private schools.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And there's a lot of discussion at the moment happening, because New Zealand went, we're going to do, everyone's going to play. Public schools, we're going to introduce it.
Yep.
And they had a better cream of the crop to choose from. Because, just because you're privileged, white and elitist, like I am, right, doesn't mean that, you're not going to be the best. There's people who come from other backgrounds who could absolutely outperform any of us. And I think that's one of the things that I just was interested to see if that was in the book. But I like the idea, because the All Blacks struggled for a very long time, and they were unbelievable as a team. And then Richie McCaw was their captain, and then all of a sudden, he was the heart of a lion. And you look at them, and they had this transformation, this complete turn. So I'm going to read the book. I've got goosebumps all over me.
Yep, it's amazing. It was one of the best books I've
and that's
read.
recent.
Yep.
What is a legendary book that everybody must read?
From marketing perspective, Seth Godin, Purple Cow has been probably one of the first great marketing books which I've read. Legendary books. So many to choose from. I'm just going to pull out Patrick Lencioni, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
You mentioned, I think you told, is that the guys you guys hired at Right Away? Did you bring him in?
No, I didn't bring him in, but I put on a video so people could watch it. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember you telling me, you said, Christian, you need to read this book for your clients.
Yeah.
Right, so that was
Patrick Lencioni. So he's in like the Stephen Covey stable of
sounds like another
authors.
Italian.
Lencioni. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he is.
He's surrounded by them.
Yeah.
What is it? 5 Dysfunctions?
5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Really, it's just all about how to recognize the signs of a poor performing team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's like the 5 most common poor performing teams and how to resolve that.
Amazing.
It's a great book, and you quickly look at that, and you very quickly pick up on. You look at the teams around you and how those dysfunctions, are manifesting themselves in your team, and then what you can do to address them before they become.
So it's something that you can practically apply,
Absolutely.
which is awesome. And they're really good books, mate. We are going to run out of time, not because time is not in our side. You've got to go and pick up Sam, and so I don't want Sam to be standing outside school waiting for you on my account and for our listeners. But what's your top 3 lessons that you would impart on? Not necessarily someone younger, but someone who was driven and hungry, whether they were in their 40s, whether they were in their 20s, whether they were 12, or even in their 60s. What would be 3 lessons that you would impart about life or business to help that person?
Be humble is a big one, and humble in that don't ever think you're above doing something else. Again, one of the great lessons, one of the things from legacies at All Blacks is their value sweep the sheds. And that's one where you've got to be humble. Don't think you're above anyone else. Don't think that just because someone's a junior or someone has less seniority than you in your role, they're somehow inferior or lesser than you. Always be willing to help them. Another one is to be true to yourself as well, in terms of know what you stand for and know what your values are, and try to find opportunities which align to that, because there is nothing worse than being somewhere which doesn't align with your values. If you feel that getting up each morning and having to do this thing is just the most painful thing in the world, get out if you can. If you've got the opportunity, get out. Because there's nothing more.
I couldn't agree with you more, mate. That's how I cherry pick my clients. Is whether or not they align with my values. It's the first question I ask them.
Yep.
Well, I uncover it. Most of the time, a lot of them don't actually know their values, and so we unpack that and build that out. One more thing.
And we talked about this earlier. It's not all heart. Make sure you've got head and heart.
It's funny. I've written that twice down, and you know why? Because I need to put that up in my office to remind myself that when the next great adventure comes up, that I don't just jump in. And I think that's a really good lesson for the venture capitalists that listen to the show, and I've got a lot. We've both got a few VC friends and contacts in that space, and I've gotten some really good lessons out of them, where you've got to make sure the numbers stack up and the heart isn't what drives it. However, we've got to always support a founder with heart, because when the going gets tough, that's the person, that's the heart that get going and keeps it going. And
I think you're absolutely right. Like, founders always need to have heart behind it, but then it's making sure that you can provide them. And I guess, like you, one niche which I found is actually coaching founders. Coaching and mentoring founders to kind of help them with that, because a lot of them, they've got the vision, they've got the heart, but they don't know how to build. And that's the bit which, I turns out I'm actually very good at it. In terms of helping them build, actually helping them think through the structures they need to put in place so they can actually, build something sustainable and then scale it.
Do you know why you're good at it? Have you worked that out yet?
No, I haven't actually.
Because you've actually done it. You've actually been there. See, I see a lot of, we won't talk about it because I might get in trouble, and you saw it firsthand. There's a lot of people doing that work who are not very good at it, because they've gone and learnt how to do a coaching program, and that's not taking anything away from these people, but there is a place for everybody, but be careful who you take advice from, is what I always say to people. In your case, I think that first childhood experience, well, not childhood experience, but first catastrophic failure experience, but also your childhood experience of those Technics 1200s, but that other deeper layer where it was, hey, like, you're also really successful around me, I'm not going to be left behind, right? And I think that you had that transition in your life to then have a catastrophic failure that was probably fueled by that as well. Like, for me, it was validation. I was always seeking validation. I was like, all right, when's the next newspaper article with me coming out? And this was when I was getting positive. Now it's like, you're a journalist. No, I'm not really ready to talk to you right now. But the thing is, it's really important to understand who you are. And that's why you're good at it. That's me. And I can say that. People probably think, well, Christian, what gives you the right to say that to Mal? Well, I actually brought Mal into the University of Adelaide's mentoring program to help startups. And that was one of the reasons. Because I knew. And then when I got the feedback in the first quarter, people were like, who's this guy? He's like really good. And I'm like, he's my mate, right? And I think,
but it's funny. Like, there's a couple of pieces of advice which have kind of really resonated me with, which have been around the similar thing. One of them was from you a few years back when you told me something very similar to that, which kind of made me prick up my ears, and go, okay, yep. And then also another mentor of mine, Manuel Ortigosa, who you know as well. Manuel very recently, only a few months ago, said to me like, what do you do really well? Figure that out and then do that. And which is
that's
what I'm
solid advice. And I think that's why I love where you've gone now. I love that you've gone. You're doing what you really are good at, and you genuinely want to succeed, and you're staying so niche to e-commerce, and then building out the suite of products around that to support those companies. And we both know that's a service people need. And now you got to go and grab Sam. I am so excited. Thank you so much for joining me. And for our listeners, I know they're going to love the show. Mate, we've got to do that dinner and lunch at my house.
Absolutely.
We keep cancelling. But thank you, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Christian.
Yes, thank you.